Would you like to learn how to make this spinning 5-pointed star quilt block for your quilt or project? Stick around and I'll show you how. Welcome to part 1 of piecing together the spinning 5-point star block. In this section we're going to go over materials, preparing your pattern, and sewing the first pieces of fabric onto the paper. Here we go. Today we're going to be working on the spinning 5-point star quilt block pattern, option 2 in the 8.5 inch size. So you're going to need page 8, option 2 for the 8.5 inch block. You're going to need some pieces of fabric for the background. If you want a solid background, just use all the same fabric. The fabric that I'm using has a combination of scroll and polka dot patterns. They have a wrong and a right side, and this is to help you understand what I'm doing as I'm putting it together. These are various sizes, but I measured out a strip that's between 4 and 4.5 inches for the background pieces. Then I have pieces for each side of the star points, yellow and orange. They both have a distinct right side and wrong side so that you can see what I'm doing. You also need a cutting mat, a pin, a ruler, a rotary cutter, some pins, some kinds of scissors and or snips, and of course a sewing machine. An iron is also necessary for this quilt block. So the first thing we need to do is prep our block. And the block that I'm going to make is a copy of this. One thing to know about paper piece patterns is that they are the reverse of what you plan, because the right side of the fabric winds up being on the wrong side of the paper. So you get basically a mirror image of what you want. So in order for me to duplicate this star, I need to actually swap sides with the colors. So I'm going to mark my pieces before I start cutting. So orange is on the right side of each of my star points. That means that I need to write an O for orange on the left side of each of my star points, because it's going to be a mirror image. To get yellow on the left side, I need to put yellow on the right side, so I'm going to give a Y on each of the right sides on the paper to match the left side. So along with my yellow, I've got polka dots. So on the yellow side, which is the left side, on the fabric, it's going to be the right side of the pattern. So yellow, yellow, polka dot, polka dot. So I'm just going to put a PD for the polka dot, and then every other section should get a PD for polka dot. Okay, and then on the right side is my scroll, which means it's going to be on the left side, and I'm just going to put an S for scroll in those 5 blocks. So now I have my quilt block marked. One last thing I might want to do is put a little line around the outside of my block so that once I have this cut apart, I know which parts are the outside. And last but not least, I want to mark my sew lines. If you download version 3, all of these lines are already marked, 1, 2, 3, and the direction that you should sew. The arrows in this case point toward the presser foot. So when you put, say, section E in, you're going to put your first seam in so that this arrow is pointing towards the presser foot, and you'll push it through the machine in this direction. Same thing with the green and the purple. Okay. If you have version 1 or version 2, you can mark it on your pattern if you like, but I'm not going to. I am going to just put a 1, a 2, and a 3 on my yellow, green, and purple respectively. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put a line under the yellow so that I can be consistent in where I put that color when I'm placing my pieces. All right, that's all of my marking. I'm going to put this aside. The next thing I need to do is I need to cut this apart. So I'm going to use my ruler and my blade, even though I know some of you are going to cringe at me using my cutting blade for both paper and fabric. That's just how I do. First thing we're going to do is cut around the outside on the solid blue lines. All the way around the square. And this square measures 8.5 inches, which will give you an 8-inch finished block. After I have the outside cut, the next thing I want to do is I want to cut up this red dotted line. The dotted line is what goes up the center of my block. So I'm just going to line that up so that I'm right in the middle of the dashes there, and I'm going to give it a cut in half. Then I'm going to cut on the blue dotted lines, again lining up right in the middle of the dotted line. Give that a cut. Give that a cut. This a cut, and this a cut. Now, unlike the 12.5-inch version of this block, the seam allowances are not built in. So once you get each of these sections pieced, you will have to add the seam allowance with your ruler. On version 3, I have written in red little reminders, add seam allowance, just in case you forget. But on versions 1 and 2 of the pattern, that's not there, so you'll just have to remember to add a 1/4 inch all the way around once you have each piece sewn together. Step 2 of your prep is to fold on the solid sew line for each block. So for A1, it's going to be this green line, and I like to fold with the print to the outside first, and then I fold back the other direction so the print is on the inside, because this is the way we're going to use the pattern, and it's easier to sew in the valley than it is on the mountain. Okay, so we're going to take all of our pieces and we're going to fold on the sew line. So for A2, it's going to be this purple line. If you like, you can use a piece of cardstock to help you fold straight lines, but I'm pretty comfortable with it, so I'm just gonna use my fingers here. Part B, we've got 3 sew lines. I'm gonna start with the purple line. Then I'm gonna fold the green line, and the sequence doesn't really matter. But go ahead and fold beyond the line, fold all the way across the piece of paper, not where the green stops. And same thing with the yellow. You're going to fold all the way across the piece of paper. Don't stop at the end of the yellow line. And then I'm going to fold all of my folds in the opposite direction so it's easier to work with once I start sewing it to the paper. I've got my A1 and my A2 here. I need a yellow piece of fabric for A2 and an orange piece of fabric, excuse me for that, for A1. I need a scroll piece of fabric for A1, and I need a polka dot piece of fabric for A2. So here's how we're going to work this. Your first piece of fabric on a section, and this is the only time it's going to be orange because you don't have yellow on A1. The first piece of fabric is going to go right side down. Then you're going to take your paper piece, and let's make sure I'm in the frame, and you're going to lay it down so that you have at least 1/4 of an inch all the way around that shape. So this triangle here should have at least 1/4 inch all the way around it with that fabric face down. And I'm going to fold this over and pin it to that piece of fabric, just to kind of hold it there temporarily. Your next piece of fabric, let's see if this piece, this is a smaller piece, is going to be face up, okay? Your second piece of fabric is going to be face up, and you want it to fit underneath this folded shape so that you have at least 1/4 inch all the way around. I don't have that there. So let's see if we can rotate it around and fix this so we have it. That looks pretty good. The way that you check is this face down fabric is facing your, the face down paper is facing your face up fabric, and you want to check all around this shape. So this is a rhombus of sorts, this shape. So the way you check is obvious where you can see the fabric. I've got more than 1/4 inch there, I've got more than 1/4 inch there. Where you can't see that gray fabric, I'm going to put my finger right on the intersection and pull up anything in my way to see if I have 1/4 inch, and I do. And then I have one more point down here. I'm going to pull that up and see if I have at least 1/4 of an inch on both sides, and I do. So because I'm in place now, I can take this pin out, holding my paper where it is. I'm going to open it up and I'm going to pin it. Now because this is my first piece, I want to make sure that these don't rotate at all, so I'm just going to put a second pin in here just until I'm ready to sew. All right, so that's my A1 set up for the machine. A2, we're going to start the same way. Every part from this point is going to start with yellow face down, and my paper faced up. I'm going to set it on there so I have 1/4 inch all the way around. I'm pretty comfortable with that placement. I'm not going to pin it, but I am going to fold this over, and then I'm going to take this piece and I'm going to kind of maneuver it around face up, see if I can make it fit. That looks pretty good. My triangle is on this shape. My rhombus is on this shape. I've got more than 1/4 inch, more than 1/4 inch. I need to check down here on the bottom. Let's see. Take a peek there. That looks good. More than 1/4 inch on both sides. And here at this point, more than 1/4 inch on both sides. It looks really good all the way around. So holding that paper down, I'm going to open it up. I'm going to put a pin at both the top and the bottom. I just like to do that on my starting point so that everything is anchored and doesn't get twisted out of the correct orientation. So there's my A2. Parts B, C, D, and E are going to be very similar in that they're all star points. So what I can do is I can lay down my orange face up, put my yellow face down right on top of it, and then I can set up each one of these blocks. So I'm going to take the first pair. I want the yellow down, orange up. They're both mirror images. They're the same size. So I can just stick it anywhere really on here and just ensure that I have a 1/4 inch all the way around. Because I have this straight line here, I got plenty of room. I'll just scoot it over. So I've got 1/4 inch all the way around this diamond shape. And I'm going to open it up. And I'm going to take a pin. And I'm going to pin this at the top and at the bottom. Because again, I don't want it to rotate at all. And I only do this with adding my first piece on there. Remember, the yellow goes under the yellow, face down. Your other piece goes face up. It's the same shape. We already know it's going to fit. So B is ready. Same thing with C. You want the yellow facing up, the yellow on the paper, the Y, facing up. Get that so we have plenty of space all the way around. We're going to open it up. We're going to give it 2 pins. Okay, let's pile. The yellow's on top, pretty side down. Take the yellow, fold it over, get ourselves centered up so that we know that we have space all the way around. Open up our paper, 2 pins. Okay, and this is to make sure that we keep, that distance that we have set up. Last piece. Yellow on top, pretty side down, orange on the bottom, pretty side up. The Y goes on top of there, and you fold it over. Make sure you have 1/4 inch all the way around. Open up your piece of paper and pin, top and bottom. Right. So I'm going to take these to the machine, and each one I'm going to sew our first seam, which is the yellow seam. I'm going to start about a 1/4 inch away from the seam. Then I'm going to follow that right down the center, and I'm going to continue till about a 1/4 of an inch beyond the seam. Okay, I'm going to do that on every one of these. I'm going to start where I'm a 1/4 of an inch, beyond the seam. In this case, it's the purple seam, so it'll be out here, and then a 1/4 inch beyond on this end. Same thing here. This is the green seam this time, 1/4 inch and a 1/4 inch, and that's where I'll be stopping my stitches, and then we'll continue. I have green thread up top and teal thread in the bobbin, so hopefully you'll be able to see what I'm stitching. But I'm going to start sewing my pieces together, and I'll start with A1. Start with A1 and start sewing these together. I'm going to start at the bottom here because I have my pins in that way. Let's get myself a place to put these pins. Alright, so I'm going to start about a 1/4 inch away from the edge of my paper. And one thing I forgot to mention, you do want to shorten your stitch length. I'm going to put mine on 1.6, see how I like it. I often forget because I don't very often use this method of paper piecing. So we'll see how this works. but you want to shorten your stitch length so that you can tear the paper away more easily at the end. So here we go. And you just want to carefully stitch right on top of that green line, and you want to keep stitching for about 1/4 inch beyond it. Okay, so that's my first piece, and I'm just going to chain stitch these until they're all 6 pieces have gone through their first iteration. Right on top of the first one. Taking my pins out as I go. I know that looked weird, right? Okay, when I get to the end of the paper, I'm going to keep going for about 1/4 inch away from the edge. And I'm going to stitch that off. All right, so now we're to B. For these pieces, I'm going to take my pin out. I like to start near the middle and work my way to the outside. I feel like I get a better result that way. So I'm just going to line myself up with this yellow, which is my first one, about 1/4 inch away beyond the purple line. And I'm going to stitch. And this you should be able to see because I'm using this green thread. I'm just going to stitch off the edge there. Same thing here. I like to start in the middle. I'm going to raise my needle. I'm going to start beyond. Try to stay on top of that yellow line. I'm just going to stitch off. This one I got a little curve. Raise my needle. Start a little beyond. Get myself lined up. Try to keep that yellow line right in the middle here. I'm using a 1/4 inch foot. Okay, and last one. See, it's harder to start at that point. So I start in the middle. And I have all that paper underneath, and I don't have to worry about anything getting folded over. Stitch off. Okay. So you can see, I hope you can see that, my stitch line right on top of the yellow. I've started before, well, I started up here, so I started before the line and continued beyond the line. Okay, and I've done that. I'll use this to separate my pieces on all of these. So that's C. Got my thread. There's D. Here's B. Here's A2 and A1. When you look on the back side, it looks like this. You see my teal thread on the back and my green on green stitches here in the front. All right, so now I'm going to shift my camera one more time and we'll do the next step. So congratulations, you got through the first part. That was really the hardest part of putting the pattern together, is learning in which direction to put your fabric so that it fits on the next section of the pattern. So in the next section, we're going to go over a little bit more of that and adding the 3rd and 4th pieces of fabric to parts B, C, and D, and squaring each section up before final assembly. In the 3rd section, we're going to finally assemble the block. So I hope you'll join me. If you found this useful, please like and subscribe. I do intend to have more content up in the future, and I sincerely hope you'll join me.